Hello? Am I fine? So is it fine? So am I fine? Am I fine? People are watching. So should I start? Should I stop? Am I audible? Kindly write in the comments. That's fine. That's fine. So the topic which I am going to address today is Ibn Sina's deliverance, or logic and science, how they evolved in medieval ages. So Ibn Sina was one of the monumental figure in the medieval times. Not only he we know as the popular imagination goes, or as the popular uh, historiography goes, or how we are viewing him in terms of as a part of Muslim culture, or as part of scientific tradition. He's more or less known in terms of his contribution to this field of medicine. His famous Al Qanun, for which was considered for 600 years, it was considered a canon of medicine, a reference for medicine. And he's also lesser known people also know him as a philosopher, but what is less known in popular imagination, or in the popular current literature, that Ibn Sina is known as logician, but is not the his influence as a logician, or his contribution as a logician is not known that much. So I'll just what I should say, uh, uh, the logical aspect, his contribution of Ibn Sina in logic. I'll just try to what I should say, orient my lecture, or I'll try to place this contribution of Ibn Sina in logic with reference to the medieval times, how the sciences evolved or the logic evolved, and the various debates which were uh, uh, prevalent in those times. So, so as we know, Ibn Sina was he was born in Central Asia, in the near Amu Darya basin. So he was a monumental figure. He is even called Grand Sage, or Sheikhul Rais of that tradition. So, what I'm going to discuss is Ibn Sina's deliverance, for example, is particular logic, his contribution to logic. So if you, for example, scholars have normally shied away in translating lot of his. We know Ibn Sina as a metaphysician. We know Ibn Sina as a healer of medicine, a doctor, a physician. But the Ibn Sina as a logician is known, but he's not known to the point where what he deserves. So why he is not known that way? There are a couple of reasons for that, which I am trying to, which I am going to elucidate. Okay, so the reputation of Ibn Sina as a metaphysician, or a school as a philosopher. Uh, so 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 his works on formal logic, maybe they were consequences of particularly Arabic philosophy. For example, the Ibn Sina's logic was unfairly rejected by historians of logic. given the scale of impact on post-Avicennian logics. Because the reason being that there are not modern translators have no Latin exemplar or guide to uh, their work in the way the translators of metaphysicians or the medicines have. For example, when there was a school, so when there was a translation, there is in the Baitul Hikmah of Greek and Latin, and of texts of Aristotle, Greeks, Platonians, lot of there is a tradition. After 100 years, Muslim scholars, Muslim physicians, Muslim scientists, they not only translated, they also started to contribute to the knowledge process as such. So in the process, even the book medicine like Galen. So the way for Ibn Sina, he found even this medicine relatively easy in his own words as compared to logic. So he, even if you read his biography, he says that he could not understand that Aristotelian metaphysics. He had very difficulty in understanding, and one fine day somehow he purchased a rendering of Al-Farabi's work, how Al-Farabi's sharh on this Aristotle, and things became clearer to him post facto. So commonly, why Ibn Sina? Why, for example, because when Ibn Sina's works were later translated, his school, when there was a in Middle Ages, from when the pattern of knowledge from Greeks to the Muslims, then again there was a process of translation in terms of Latinization of Arabic literature, that his also has its own history. But in that process, why did, if they translated his texts in medicine and philosophy and other texts, why not the texts of these what I should say, logic? There are a couple of reasons for that. For example, in Ibn Sina, the logician, for example, he not only improvised on the Aristotelian text organon, the text on logic, the syllogistic renderings of Aristotle or post-Aristotelian logic, which was improvised upon by Ibn Sina in bits and pieces. At a certain stage, Ibn Sina, he somehow went ahead far than that of Aristotle in terms of his what I should say, his I should say improvements or his developments of his understanding of logic. So what happened is that, for example, Ibn Sina, so you could say that that Ibn Sina, if you take the Aristotelian metaphysics, so you can have a map, the Ibn Sina of metaphysics, how he improvised or how he improved or how he extended the work of Aristotle as a metaphysician to Ibn Sina as a metaphysician. You can understand the link. But the improvement in logic was so much that when Ibn Sina initially could deviate from Aristotle in fundamental assumptions, but at some later stage he found that he transformed the Aristotelian syllogistic reasoning in terms of logic was so much that in his later texts, for example, in pointers and reminders, for example, he did not directly refer to Aristotelian logic. So when the later texts, so there are a lot of texts. So the role of Aristotle is not seen in the later text of Ibn Sina. And plus the Muslim scholars or the scientists who translated Ibn Sina, the later texts of logic of Ibn Sina. So for them, he was what for example, he was the what I should say. So he was the pointer of Ibn Sina, the pointer of Muslim philosophers, Muslim logicians. Their reference point was Ibn Sina rather than Aristotle. So whatever improvements, So there is a word. Previously, there was Aristotelian logic and post-Aristotelian logic, but the contribution of Ibn Sina historically was so much that there was Aristotle, and then after Organon, his logical work, the improvisation of Ibn Sina was that there was Ibn Sina only. So Muslim philosophers, Muslim science logicians who translated Ibn Sina, they did not directly refer to. They do not refer to Aristotle as such. So even though Aristotle, the metaphysician, you could have a relation with the Ibn Sina, the metaphysician, or Aristotle, the philosopher. So you could see the influence of philosophy of Aristotle in philosophy of Ibn Sina. But there was a marked shift that the Aristotle, the logician, because he somehow changed the fundamental postulates and a lot of things in Aristotle reasoning or logic, which differed in a way. Then you could say that Ibn Sina was more, he just the student in logic somehow improvised on masters several miles. But why was not his why were not his what I should say renderings in logic translated? Is because of the fact, even if they might have been translated, but because there was no reference to Aristotle, he was not properly understood in the translation or transliteration process also. So there is another very interesting story also, which I am going to discuss as I go by. So, for example, in his last treatise, Ibn Sina wrote was Pointers and Reminders from late period. So he sets his own logical system without reviewing the contemporary or classical alternatives it's meant to replace. So prior analytics, Ibn Sina's journey from existential reform to abandonment of Aristotelian or did not involve changing a single major doctrine. So, for example, two subjects he developed long was two subjects Ibn Sina or Ibn Sina develops longest was modal logic involving premises, which I'll say what are premises, and modal premises, the truth conditions and inferences one may draw from them. So intellectual life in the realm of Islam was slightly radically different from that of West, for example. So even if you try to understand even historically also, there was something called, if you want to understand Ibn Sina also, there was a tradition called peripatetic tradition. In peripatetic tradition, there were Greek philosophers that include Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato, but they also included Stoics, they included Epicureans, they included Platonists. But one interesting development, maybe due to historical reasons or due to fate, that Muslim translators in their earlier stages, they translated Aristotle in bulk as compared to the other two, his teacher Plato and Socrates. So even though it's very interesting and curious that even though when Muslim scholars have to disagree with Aristotle, they will not go to Plato and Socrates, they will go to Epicureans, they will go to Stoics, they will go to other schools of philosophy. So in that sense, preceding Ibn Sina, there was Farabi. Farabi, he somehow translated his works. So his works, these works, as well as dialogical relation with each other, he translated them in a certain way, and that was somehow translated to Ibn Sina. So what, before I'm going to say what this is a historical background basically. So there's a very Ibn Sina's deliverance, for example, is this person, and there are a lot of people who have just what I should say worked on his they have collected, they have tried to find the roots of this Ibn Sina as a logician, how historically you could see it. So Rene Goutas, this lot of people, they have worked on this very thing. So what I want to say, that basically what one important point is that at some point in time, for example, why one of the problem was that why would Aristotle's writings have to say, so what so before I'm going to say something about what it is this what Avicenna's errands are, you might be, so I'll not his exact contributions into logic, so I'll somehow give flavor of what he has done in the larger background of philosophy and science in the medieval ages. So what his deliverance is, basically Ibn Sina's deliverance is how he has basically, in logic you might be knowing something called subject, something called predicate. For example, what is a subject and what's a predicate is some conclusion you draw from subject. Subject has some quality. And there is something called premise. Premise means some original logical structure on which you base your fundamental argument. And from premise, you arrive at, from some logical assumptions, you have some deductive method or an inductive method of arriving at a certain conclusive statement. So there may, that conclusive statement may be arrived from a one proposition or a set of propositions. But one important thing in Avicenna's rendering, or even Aristotelian rendering of logic, is that for Aristotle, syllogism is a rule, for example, which involves more than two sentences in logic. For example, there is a famous, if there is a statement that Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, but from this we can conclude that Socrates is also mortal. So this is a syllogism. So a statement, from two statements you arrive at a conclusion. So but in the understanding of this syllogistic understanding of statements, how we arrive at conclusions, so there is an understanding of language, there is an understanding of grammar, and there is an understanding of logic. So how the conclusions which you arrive at from syllogistic renderings, they should not lead to absurd conclusions, or they should lead to statements which are not ambiguous. So the whole aim of logic has also some significant overlappings with the field of philosophy. But when we try to make philosophy exact in terms of statements, we just say that it is logic in common parlance. But technically also, so how is Ibn Sina? So I would recommend you that you read first a bit Aristotelian section of logic, and then Greek logic, and then you go to how. First, you go to how Aristotelian logic is. What is Aristotelian logic? So in Aristotle, you might have from your earlier classes heard that, for example, if A is B is equivalent to B, B is equivalent to C, this means A is equivalent to C. So this is a common statement. Or if two equals are subtracted from two equals, the equals are the rest, what is remaining, that equals are equivalent to equal. Or whole is greater than the part. Or a statement is true or not true. These are logical statements, but they are the part of that Aristotelian logical system, which we take unconsciously as part, as you might have studied in your earlier classes in your arithmetic. So you take them as part of truths, but they are truths, but they are logical systems or structures which have been started by Aristotle in some way. So how Ibn Sina, I would not go how exactly his works are, but the flavor is that if you study the Ibn Sina's deliverance, the logic part of it, there are now translations are available. Earlier, it's because of its Persian or Arabic texts, and because of the historical reasons of Renaissance, it was not available. But no logicians have exactly traced the various renderings, post-Aristotelian renderings of Ibn Sina. Aristotle, and how the later logicians of medieval age, different schools of logic, they were influenced by Ibne Sena via his scholars or via his translators who improvised on him. And somehow the later Latin translators somehow missed on this point. So, for example, you might be knowing something called, for example, for Ibn Sina, there is something called concept, and there is something called judgment. Okay? So, knowledge of simple he calls mufarad, knowledge of complex. So I'll of definer without proof. So, solitary report, it's known as. So about a rational, not sensitive, subject to correction or error. So no judgment may be known except syllogism, which I have said. So logicians argue propositions through multiple transmission. That's known as tawatir, means continuous transmission of something. Empirical inquiry, that's known as tajruba. So how we arrive at something. Sense perceptions, that's known as hawas. So demonstrations must include that universal premise. The starting assumption is valid. So we classify. So further, what he says that knowledge may be reached by constructing or ordering talif judgment in such a manner that we may obtain inference. So how we arrive at a statement or how we arrive at a conclusion, there are ways of arriving at it. Not only if you have a linguistic understanding, but you have also a logical understanding of language also. How ultimately language reduces to what? So in logic, normally also we say that mathematics is also a compressed language. It's a logical language. So you compress what words, meanings, sentences, statements, syntax, semantics. So these are common words. You can see them. So what is the way? How knowledge is arrived at? So there are three ways. For example, there is syllogistic understanding, which I was saying, Aristotelian way of looking at things, which somehow Ibn Sina improvised on. There is an inductive way of understanding things, and there are analogical. So examples, analogical way of, so which is also used in the juristic understanding of things. So if you say even Farabi, also a lot of people were interested in not only logics, they were interested in the sister disciplines of logic, jurisprudence, in grammar, that's known as ilm sarf, and now in Arabic it's called. So they all have somehow interrelations. So if you want to make language precise, it won't make language comprehensible. And what is the identity of word, meaning, and substance, for example? Even in syllogistic understanding, when we say that two things are equal to the same thing, does it mean they are equal to each other? For example, you say that iron is attracting magnet is attracting iron. Does it mean that iron is attracting iron? So no. So, but in quantitatively, it might be true. But qualitatively, if you take something as some quantity having some quality also, so how is this law of excluded middle? So epistemology different renderings to it. So modern debates of Frege and Russell. So there are no new of Brower who will have a different understanding of this thing. So the roots, the debates of these language, logic, so they have many years, even in nowadays, we can say that you can trace it to our times also. It has a. So following footsteps of Aristotle, Arab logicians deemed syllogisms as the only way of finding the apodictic knowledge. Apodictic knowledge means knowledge of you can rely on. So how do we classify things? For example, complete definition, it is called Hadi Tamim. Species means Anwa. Genre means Ajnas, a larger set. So differences means Fusul. So failing that, a property is called Khasa, and a general property is known as ahmad. Okay? So there are some other So words, for example, concept is called tasawwur, judgment is called tasdeeq, definition is called had. So SN is called dat. And what I am trying to say, there is something called demonstrative syllogism. So you have to demonstrate something in terms of language. So that is known as Qiyasi Burhani. So concepts are either primary or acquired. Things which are equal to one thing or equal to one other thing. Things are either true or false, excluded middle. So all primary judgments are acquired by means of inferences ranging from syllogism to analogy. Primary judgments and concepts are self-evident, and acquired judgments require the use of inference. Acquired judgments may be achieved only through definitions, others, rules. So an inference proceeds from particular to universe or from one particular to another particular. So before I'm going to, so these are general words. For example, how he has the glossary of words and meanings when he starts with, for example, in his book, in this deliverance, or najat is the logical word is najat. So deliverance is the English translation. For example, he says that all primary cognition, marifa, and scientific knowledge, ilm, is either conceptualization or asserting. So conceptualization is a knowledge that comes first, and it occurs by means of a definition, had, and whatever it is. An example is our conceptualization of kuditi or mahiya of man. So assenting comes about only by means of syllogism or qiyas. So both syllogism and the definitions are constructed composed of intelligible maqula concepts mani, keeping with the determined mode of composition. Each one has a matter madda from which it is composed and formed surah, whereby its composition is completed. So these are his words. For example, when he talks of benefit of logic, he says logic is a theoretical discipline, sinai nazariya, that explains to you from which forms and matters come about the correct definition. That is truly called a definition, and the correct syllogism that is called demonstration or burhan. So now the logic is of various kinds. For example, jadali, khitabi, mughalai, sufasti, takhayul, and even poetic syllogism. It's known as qiyasi shari. So qiyas has various kinds. For example, dialectical means you are in sort of dialogue. There is statement, but that statement is in dialogue. That's another statement. But if there is a statement and other statement, is definitely it concludes from that statement. It is also a certain sort of syllogism. Then there are simple utterances, alfaz mafruda. There are complex utterances. For example, in linguistics, there is something called murakkab. Murakkab means you are made up of many words. Mu'allaf. So in the same way, universal, kulli, simple utterance. So I would recommend you read. I'll not go through whatever he has sent, but I'll just saying that one thing he is. In this book, what I should say, is how Ibne Sena's understanding of science and relationship of different science, which is pretty close to how we appreciate science in our times. For example, I'll read what he says about science. For example, on subject of matters of the sciences. Sciences are either distinct from each other or correspond to each other. The subject matter of those that are distinct do not overlap either with respect to their essences or their genus. Distinct sciences, arithmetic and physics. Now how he sees physics and arithmetics. Of those sciences that contribute to each other, some are equal to the other in rank, some are contained in others, and some are inferior to others. So he sees science, some are inferior, some are superior, and can derive some sciences from other sciences. For example, when he talks of arithmetic and geometry, for their subject matters are same in kind but measurable dimension, and number are two species of quantity. Another example is physics and science of stars, ilm al-najum, astronomy, ilm al-haya. For their subject matters are one and the same. That is celestial body of the world, though their approaches to the same subject matter are different. For some considers them insofar So in a way he is trying to say how astronomy and physics are related. So as you apply the principles of physics in understanding the laws of astronomy in the astronomy, not laws in the astronomical phenomena. So that's why his relation is given, how one subject is dependent upon another, how arithmetic and geometry are related, and which is more superior than the other, or what is the derivation, can geometry be derived from arithmetic or vice versa. So he has discussed these very things which you take as given in 20th century. So what my point in saying is that he has discussed these very things way back, centuries back. And when he talks on the cooperation of sciences, cooperation among sciences entails taking a problem from one science as a premise to another. The science in which the proposition is a problem aids the science in which it occurs as a premise, means fundamental assumption, premise. This happens in three ways. For example, the first of them, when one of the two sciences is inferior to other, so that the lower science acquires its principal definition from the higher one. It's also now laws of chemistry. Ultimately, you see they have to be quantum mechanics. Ultimately, understands subatomic phenomena. So many electrons. So laws of chemistry you can ultimately reduce them to laws of physics, or laws of physics to mathematical things, to larger philosophy. So the reductionism. He is not talking reductionism in that sense, but he is talking a conceptual reductionism. You can understand. He talks of superiority and inferiority of sciences. For example, he talks of, an example is the reception of premises of the science of music from arithmetic. Music has something to learn from arithmetic, and medicine from physics, and all philosophy. So these are his what I should say relations. What I should say. So. It's not only you have to understand Ibne Sena. So Ibne Sena cannot be understood if you don't know the times in which he was living it. You cannot understand Ibne Sena in a vacuum. So you have to understand his Ibne Sena in the discourse, the times there was a person called Ibn Razi, Fakhruddin Razi, and there were people like Ibn Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah. So they were made major figures. There was Farabi. So they not only, so nowadays the clean definition of science, this is mathematics, this is physics. Earlier, it was in 16th century, it was called natural philosophy. Even prior to defining natural philosophy, when Newton came, so there was no clear-cut thing. So where metaphysics and where philosophy starts, where logic ends, where religion starts, where religion ends, where theology starts. So there are experimental science. What are practical sciences? So so there was a dialogical state of these scholars, but also you cannot divorce the fact that the age in which they were living in, it was a religious age. Maybe people had Islam, people believed in Islam. They had there was something called Aqidah. How fundamentally, how they also not only had tried to understand things, language, nature, universe, medicine, but they also wanted to somehow place all the knowledge in terms of some underlying knowledge structure or belief system, which was religious, which was epistemological, and in that process they had different schools. So the way for example, there is a particular school, for example, if you have heard of something called Ilm al-Kalam or Kalam theologians were there. So in Kalam theologians or Kalam school, so there was logic, there was philosophy, there was hikmah. So Kalam theologians were interested in doctrines, morals, laws, but they in a very significant way used this idea of logic, or which is also called mantik in those times, what you should say. So for example, but a lot of people there have been attempts to study, for example, attempts to study things of logic or Kalam theology outside the domain of philosophy. They would not want to Islamic philosophy. They would not want to. They say that it's independent of that. But somehow, so they would not only logic, grammar, semantics, rhetoric. So, but they were somehow placed in the times they were living. The logic you cannot understand, but you have to understand the use of logic or misuse, not misuse, you have to understand use of logic or how people invoke logic in the larger debate of philosophy, religion, theology, so and different schools of theology. So how they wanted to place logic, and how Ibn Sena also tried to locate logic and to use as a fundamental mode of inquiry. For example, somewhere he writes in the book that, for example, why you are using logic. So maybe you want to arrive, but sometimes logic also, using logic also helps us in the betterment of your soul. So you become, there are aesthetic reasons also. There are many reasons of logic. One is the aesthetic reasons of the senses. Your senses are pleased. So which I am see it. So what is logic? So logic has, for example, this Kalam school, it had Akli tradition, rational, and Nakli. Akal means directly you are using rationality, and Nakal means you are using tradition. So Ghazali was one of the prominent, eminent figures in using, for example, Ghazali. Not only there is this Kalam theologians. There were two schools of theology. You might have historically known. There was Jabriya school and the Qadriya school. And in the Jabriya, free will, or what I should say, determinism in modern parlance. You can say what man is born free or he is determined. So free Jabr or Qadr debate. So these two scholars produced this Mu'tazilites and Ash'arites. So Mu'tazilites, very, very rational people. So even in their early stages, that Khalifa Ma'mun, so they had a lot of influence. So they were logical people. So, but they lived in they had a dialogue with the Ash'arites. So initially Imam Ghazali was also he was an Ash'arite, but he was not. Ash'arites were initially, if you see history, they were initially not logicians. They did not appreciate they were saying that logic somehow leads you to some erroneous conclusions, or it deviates you from the fundamental path of religion or righteousness or guidance. So logic as such has limitations. But you cannot say Ibn Ghazali was Ash'arite. He was a sophisticated Ash'arite. Somehow he found at some stages that philosophy had some fundamental limitations, but he freely used logic as an instrument to enhance his doctrines in the medieval ages. So you cannot say that a lot of people are saying that Imam Ghazali was somehow responsible, why logic or mathematics was why they somehow there was impediment in the coming centuries. It was Ghazali was responsible partially, but the way Ibn Ghazali has used freely logic in the way he constructed Ash'arite theology and the jurisprudence which followed it. So you cannot entirely say he was totally against logic. And there were people like Al-Kindi. So how Kalam theologians or used logic, for example, study of Greek logic to the doctrine of Ash'arite theology as a tool and not an end in itself. So one important character, I will not say character, one important person in the medieval times not only was Imam Razi, but Imam Razi was an Ash'arite theologian. But there was one person, Ibn Taymiyyah. So he was very much, he had written volumes on. So he had some problems with the refutation of logic. He wanted to somehow refute logic or mantiq. He said that mantiq had some fundamental limitations in as compared to revelation in the understanding of reality. So in that process, he critiqued not only Ghazali, he critiqued Ibn Sena also. So you have to understand Aristotle, Ibn Sena, Ghazali, Ibn Taymiyyah, Razi. So it's a larger set. So they could dialogue. They had a dialogical conversation, maybe as an intellectual conversation. So what Ibn Taymiyyah did, he wrote 10 volumes, maybe. So what, for example, so he had also, so the point I want to emphasize is that logic as a study. So even though he wanted to say that logic as a school of is somehow inadequate at a fundamental level, but he somehow, in order to even prove that, so he read all the schools of Aristotle. Even if you have to refute something, you have to first understand something. So it means in the process he was also a logician of a very higher standards. For example, logic has limitations. For example, the universal and particular. For example, using rules of, this is Ibn Taymiyyah's argument. Deduction is fallible. For example, he was a consistent empiricist view that all universal propositions, including mathematical and geometrical universes, are acquired through empirical observation of particulars. In particular, Ibn Taymiyyah's thesis, aside from revelation, all human knowledge begins with particulars. The mind first conceives particulars. Then, for example, so Ibn Taymiyyah was saying that, for example, if you have a general statement, you arrive at from a particular statement. So universal statement is arrived from a particular statement. For example, you can only understand 5 when you know something called 4, 3, 2, 1. So you arrive at something called 1. But 1 you know empirically from the things you see. But the a priori truths of mathematics, Platonic truths, which you say that they are a priori, they are universal, they exist in mind. But Ibn Taymiyyah's fundamental critique was that you cannot arrive at a priori universal truths unless you have an empiricist understanding of particulars which are existing out there in the world. So a lot of people are saying that, for example, contribution, the modern scientific empiricism, which started with the Western science, was realized that the value of empiricism and, for example, metaphysics of Roger Bacon, Ockman, and Berkeley, or a secular emphasis of, so the empiricism divide of mathematical, what I should say, truths, Platonic truths. So they could somehow the empirical understanding of things could be somehow. The empirical paradigm was somehow taken. It was somehow dissociated from the theology and the philosophical school of thought. The empiricism as such as a philosophy developed, but it's also an enigma, or that Ibn Taymiyyah's school fundamentally was that the empirical, the particulars cannot be possible without an empirical understanding of particulars. So so why Muslim theologians or scholars, if they would have continued on that tradition, the empirical understanding of modern science, so you could have taken it as a continuation of a part of Taymiyyan's scientific methodology. So which maybe later Western tradition appropriated in a certain way. So this is 9, 10, 11, 12. So one thing is that so I'm trying to say that so Ibn Sena and Greek logic. So you have to be clear of the Ibn Sena, the times in which he was living it, the deliverance or the Najat he wrote. So there were a lot of background schools of Islamic philosophy. There were Ash'arites, there were Mu'tazilites. So there was a peripatetic school. So there was Aristotelian Aragonon. So there was his descendants, his pupils, his students, who sometimes they carried on his baton of his understanding of logic forward, improvised on it in different ways. And not only in particular places, it also went in the different eras in Muslim eras. So now the point is that which I'm going to say is that if Ibn Sina the medieval times in which we are living in, so now the one important question is that a lot of people don't agree to the point that Western civilization is the it is one of the it's it is the forerunner, or it's the creator of modern science. So there are different opinions. So if we take Islamic tradition, a lot of people are saying that in medieval times there were crusades, and there were, so when the process of Latinization of the Arab literature or Islamic literature was taking place, so they did not really give due credit to the people who were prior to them. So there might be historical biases, for example. So maybe they are okay. For example, if you say famous Dante, if he was he had written the Divine Comedy, he only takes Ibn Sina Latinized, not Ibn Sina, Avicenna and Averroes. Ibn Rushd is called Averroes in that heaven in Muslim lands. The other people are not in heaven. He is somewhat in something called Araf Compendium. It's somewhere in middle. So you can see that a person like Ibn Sina could not. So he only was taken to that point. So you can see that you have to understand the spirit of times was what. So so the Latinized translation of Arabic or Islamic literature. So how much they appropriated it and to their own way, and how did they really give credit to the foreigners is also a lot of people are debating it that. So even if you have people like Ibn Nafis who just knew this about the circulation of blood 300 years 200 years back before that army, William Harvey or Nasir Tusi or Ibn Shatir. So there were a set of astronomers, logic, mathematics, so different fields of knowledge. So they do not properly do credit when the process started from one civilization to another civilization. So I'll just come to this point that so what important question which is maybe relevant to us also in our times is that, so if Muslim civilization at some point in time it produces such great men of learning or understanding, did it really stop or not? Or if it stopped, why did it stop? Or if it didn't stop, why did it somehow retard in the acceleration which was there in earlier centuries? Why did it retard in that very knowledge expansion? Why the baton was taken by some other people? So they improvised it, and it's natural. So, but why did it stop? So a lot of people are, for example, there can be different reasons for that. For example, a lot of people, people, for example, will take that Mongol invasions were responsible in 14th century when the Mongol invasions they burned a lot of libraries, and there was some fundamental reason that it stopped. That the Baghdad did not really recover after that Holocaust. A lot of people are giving those reasons. Some people are saying that basically the debate between Mu'tazilites and Ash'arites, the debates when the school of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal it dominated, somehow they repudiated science, logic, philosophy. To the level, for example, even in 16th century when Tycho Brahe, Copernicus, Kepler, so they were also having observatories in the same time, 16th century, maybe in Ottoman Empire. So an important observatory was somehow dismantled because of these theological disputes between these two schools of thought. Because somewhat people were saying that astrology and astronomy are related, and astrology is somehow sin, so somehow they considered astronomy as a part of astrology, and somehow they dismantled it. So this is it. So So this may be the reason. So there may be theological reasons, there may be historical reasons, or lot of people is that some people are saying that it really did not stop. For example, in the spirit of inquiry in Muslim lands, it did not really stop, as the common story goes. For example, if you see popular scientists like Parvez Hoodbhoy, or this person, he's written this book, House of Wisdom. So they also talk of they will talk of this contributions. They will say, but they will not say that as if that somehow it has stopped, or maybe they were second grade. Maybe they were second to the original creators or modern creators of science, like Galileo, the modern science. So the contribution of Muslims was second to them. Not only Muslims, maybe there is influence of Chinese, the influence of Hindus in India. A lot of scientists have been there, Brahmagupta. So what, talking of Islamic scientists, they would say that their contribution was secondary in the Renaissance, in the development of science and technology and philosophy. But the contribution was there, but it was secondary. But here, people will not necessarily agree to this statement. A lot of people will say Islam was the real contributor of modern day science or technology. Not only till 15th, 16th century, the baton was passed into some another set of people. But who were they? For example, or why did then, even if they have taken the baton, but why did not it grow to the level the way Western science has grown from last 300 years or so? So these are very complex questions basically. But one maybe reason maybe is also the fact that it has also to do something with the underlying philosophy or metaphysics of how Western science evolved for 3 centuries and how Muslim science evolved. For example, in Muslim physicists, Muslim scientists were not really interested in, for example, they were not really interested in trying to tinker with nature at fundamental level. They were interested in nature to understand nature as a lot of, they were called hakim, hukuma. They wanted to have a feeling, they wanted to be living the larger in symphony with the larger universe or larger world. And they had a realization, doing science was doing salvation. In Quran, there are verses you go for tadabbur, tafakkur. So it was not that as nature has something to be controlled at a fundamental level. The way Western science has evolved, or science has evolved for 200-300 years after Industrial Revolution, is that mass replication of some industrial techniques of somehow extracting things from nature, or somehow trying to dominate or control nature at some fundamental level. The famous statement of this Roger Bacon, knowledge is power. So the episteme, the fundamental episteme of why you do science, maybe fundamentally was different from the way science evolved 200-300 years, or how Muslims fundamentally perceived science, or even technology also, its offshoots. So that can be one of the reasons why it did not develop. But the point is that the common myth that the golden age was till 13th century or 14th century, it's not entirely true. A lot of historians have in a significant way tried to demolish this statement. But the thing is, why the science which has evolved in 300 years is dominated, why it did not grow in other. So there are some good questions. Maybe one reason may be this, the fundamental episteme of Western science, of the science, I would not say Western science, of the science as it has evolved 200-300 years. Is it that you are interested in domination, control, replication, mass replication of some technique in a universal way? Maybe people were knowing these, for example, the steam engine. These things were known to Muslims, how to have steam engine, but they do not have that interest. There is an author, Jerry Diamond, he has given reason in his book why science started here, why it did not start here, or there are even if in Chinese civilization. So why did it stop, or why did it grow uh, up and down? Why did it somehow at some stage it did not what I should say progress at that rate or accelerate at that rate? So there are maybe cultural, epistemological, there are some values also maybe which are related to it. But one thing is that the common myth that Western, that Muslim science, the golden age of science, is in 13th century or stopped in 14th century. It is not true. It might have the progress, the rate at which science was evolving or growing, it might have de-accelerated, retarded, but it did not stop totally. So that myth is not there. But comparatively, the progress was not that much. So maybe popular accounts of Hudba and Khalili, maybe they will say something different. But at least they will give contribution to the Muslim civilization. But there are people who will go to other extreme, that maybe there was a small blob in 12th, 13th century. There was 100, 200 years and nothing else. And maybe there is also particular reason. For example, maybe in previous philosophers, like in medieval philosophers, the novelty was not. Maybe you had an innovation. They denied it. They did not want to be novel. They decry that somebody I have invented something or something. While the Western, the way Descartes, what somehow sometimes what invoked novelty, and sometimes it was not. When he said "I think I am," he overemphasized, because that debate was also previously in Ibne Sena's debate of soul and matter. So a lot of things they overemphasized. Why they overemphasized? So this is also very good debate. And the very fact that when they talk of Ibn Sena, a lot of authors, Western authors, they talk of in popular books, when they talk of Khawarizmi, Ibn Sena, they will talk them as individuals and not representative of their times. I'm saying this is a big fraud. So what they should say, that maybe Ibn Sena, Ibn Shah, they were scientists, but they were heretics. They were somewhat at loggerheads with the popular Muslim thought, which they may be in contradiction with the different schools of Islamic philosophy. Sometimes Ghazali and Ibn Taymiyyah had gone overboard in criticizing Ibn Sena, but Ibn Sena himself thought himself primarily as a Muslim. That's the point. And what Western scholarship tries to do is that they are treating these people as individuals and not as representative of their times. So this is a fraud, so which you have to demystify or deconstruct. So one thing is that for example, to give you the account how it has not stopped at some point in time. For example, Ibn Ilyas, for example, he wrote that Persian text Tashir-i Mansouriya. For example, he talks of developments in medicine. There are people like Emily, to quote, Salve, Sayyid Numanul Haq, Nahyan Fancy, Niman, and others who have just in the recent works see how in the field of medicine it did not really stop in 13th century. The exploration did not really stop. In the field of astronomy, like why it did not really stop in 13th or 14th century. People like George Saiba, David King. So a lot of people they have shown that Ibn Shatir. So the tradition continued. So in the field of logic, which I was today was there in the field of logic particularly. For example, people like Tony Street, Asad Q. Ahmad. For example, Asad Q. Ahmad has written this beautiful this Asad Q. Ahmad's translation of Deliverance. And Khalil Rubab. So they are talking of relational syllogisms. So they will say that this history of Arab logic was not 12th century, 13th century. So there was a school after post-Ibn Sena, there is a development in logic. So it starts from 900 to 1900. You can see it. Even some people talk of 20th century. For example, so before 17th century. So Arabic logic as a coherent tradition before, and a close reading of Arabic texts renders it appropriate to speak of distinct traditions of Arabic logic around 1600. So even if Muslim civilization, maybe in Andalusian Spain, there was something problem, but then there were different centers of Muslim civilization. There was Ottomans, there was Safavids, there was an Indo-Muslim tradition in terms of Mughals. So there were a lot of schools of thought, for example. So where even these different schools of logic also developed parallelly. If they decayed in Ottoman Empire, it stopped somewhere in Ottoman Empire, but somehow parallelly they developed in variant forms in different places. For example, the study of Safavid in 13th century, while the entire sub-tradition of the field started, so it's not only said that the schools of logic ended in 13th century. No, it's that the various sub-disciplines of logic, they started in 17th century. For example, there is a particular case of Khairabadi school of logic in pre-partition India. So maybe there's a Farangi Mahal in Hyderabad, Ottoman, the Deccan Empire. So there were a lot of studies. There is a good people did continue that tradition, which will somehow discounts the popular thing which we read. But one thing is also there that this is also a question that why if the science in westerns, how it grew, if it did not stop, why the progress was so slow in 200-300 years. If it did not stop, why western science grew at such a large space that it has become all encompassing. So western science is a world science now, so you will be mocked if you say that it is western science. This term is also will be mocked if something called western science. But there are underlying epistemological assumptions of a particular society, how it sees world. So they are going to make. So you might be knowing George Boole and the modern day understanding of algorithms, but and starting from Aristotle, but the middle thing, the relation of this logic to computer science, to grammar, to linguistics, maybe a lot of things people might have, you have to rediscover them through these very schools of language, logic, grammar, jurisprudence also, how people judged the syllogistic reasoning to arrive at correct judgments. And one important, not only this scientific thought, but even if you, for example, if you go to this after Ibne Sena, there is something called peripatetic tradition, which I was saying, how Ibn Sena tried to locate his logic in the peripatetic tradition, the Greeks, the Stoics, the Epicureans, Farabi included. But later in Iran, for example, there's a particular person, Mullah Sadra, the Illuministic school, how they tried not only to somehow merge this peripatetic school with Ibn Sena, but also with the other schools of the Islamic philosophy, and that was known as Illuministic school, and which was taken by Mullah Sadra, Shirazi, Sabzwari, and there's a whole tradition to it. So I'll just say that to say it that like how, so it may be a challenging task to really go through those. So you have to learn Arabic texts, Persian texts, how the process of translation, transliteration, so how it went from one civilization to another civilization. So what are the loopholes? Which are the texts which were left? Which were the unknown people, the credits? We don't know the influence, who was or contributor of what, or how the knowledge process as a human endeavor, it transforms from one stage to another stage. So the contribution of a Muslim civilization in the creation of not only science, philosophy, and logic, medicine, and different fields. So it's a very important, it's an endeavor. Not only you have to see it, it's not a historical curiosity. These questions have relevance to the times in which we are living in, that why you are not able to address this question, why Muslims are not able to, why you are lacking in science and technology. So should we So these questions, how we can address these questions? So to end it, I'll just say a famous phrase, for example, if we are to learn from history, so as the old saying goes, so we need to first get it right. So if you want to learn something from history, we need to get it right. The historiography has to be right. How we arrived at it, the current state of knowledge, how we arrived at it, how the knowledge. So there are a lot of untold stories, unknown stories, which we can, which are there, which might still be there. So I'll end it. Thanks. So if people have questions, they can ask. If people have questions, they can write. I can just try to answer them. Sir, how negative philosophy affect on mathematics? Huh? So there is a particular school. Maybe there are different opinions for it. For example, a lot of people are saying that in Al Ghazali, famously he talks of astronomy and mathematics. He somehow, when he arrived at something, so he somehow, even in that, not only mathematics, there is something called ilm one is astronomy, the other is astrology. So it's somehow considered haram in Islam. So these disciplines were somehow maybe Ghazali used logic, but somehow he did not recommend them. So people are saying that they have a negative influence. That might be true, but one should not, since last 300 years or 400 years, there was the famous debate of what you should say, Ashterites and Mutazilites. There were not only Ashterites and Mutazilites, there were Maturidis, there were Shia theologians, there were different schools, there were Zindiqs, there were a lot of schools. For example, Ibne Sena, he thought himself as a Muslim. Maybe Ibn Taymiyyah had a different take on it. So who has right to, what I should say, declare another person as not believer? So if you have examples of not all writings of Ghazali, some portions of writings of Ghazali were not recommending mathematics or astrology, but there have been equivalently different scholars who did. For example, Nasiruddin Tusi was one of the eminent mathematicians, philosophers, logicians. He was a scholar also. So why should you take Ghazali's view? That's also what I was trying to say. Basically, they wanted to. This is also something deliberate. So why should you say these scientists, these mathematicians, they were apostate, they were heretic in their traditions, so they are not part of that tradition. But in that tradition, there is a lot of scope, not only for Ghazali, Ibn Sina also, Farabi also, Taimiyya also. So you can have your own school of thought. So it is partly relevant that theology maybe has an impediment, but it's not entirely relevant. There have been eminent mathematicians also, philosophers also. So if you have any questions, you can ask. So people have any questions, they can ask. Acha, how can we present the history the way it should be presented when it comes to contribution of Muslim civilization in terms of mathematics and physics? So the way I just said it, like if you want to present it in terms of contribution, you have to first see the roots of knowledge. For example, the Muslims is that you have to go to those texts. For example, there is maybe not enough Muslims, including me also. Not enough people are knowing the contributions of original. They are not. Knowing the original contribution of the scientists in their original language. You should not, even if it's not in original language. For example, there's a book Kitab al-Manazir by Ibn al-Haytham. People should have copy of that very book. There is a book by this Jabir ibn Hayyan is there. There are texts by Algebra. So you should know what was the knowledge, relevant knowledge till 10th century or 7th century. So the 7th century to maybe 16th, 17th century, what were the available texts? First, we should have those texts. Some of them may not be available. For example, when people Latinized this Arab literature, so in the process, a lot of contribution, they did not give due credit to a lot of people. But the thing is that there are good libraries, maybe in Muslim lands, in Egypt, Al-Cairo, in India also. For example, there is Khuda Bakhsh library in there. In Hyderabad, Dakkan, there is the Farangi Mahal. And different, but you have to go to these in Iran. There are places, there are libraries, you have to go and mine those texts, ancient texts, which might be available in those libraries by these original authors. And unless and until we study them, and then people who have taken it from them, for example. So, for example, even Newton's Principia is it in Latin. So much was Latinized. So, even Galileo's work. So, you have to see the role of language. So you have to first see who were the contributors. You have to see for example, you have to see logic by Aristotle, Organon. Then you have to see Ibne Sena's. You have to read his Najat. Then there are schools, how the post Najat, how we developed various sacred texts and then you have to come to modern day logic like Boole and this Hamilton and other things. Then you can read it. So you can read when there is a transference of knowledge. So that is the only process. Or you have to go to meet people, for example. It's said that Ibn Sena's renderings in, for example, medicine, even a lot of people, even in the coming of modern day medicine, a lot of people are even the Ibn Sena that we have the other schools of medicine. There are living examples of some people So you have to even meet people. Maybe they might have so you have to properly read those texts. You have to go to those antique places, and you have to also see the link how when it was translated or translation from one civilization to another, what did they take or what they did not properly recommend. For example, there is this person called C.K. Raju. He has very much tried to study these things in terms of calculus. The story of, you should really see his book, The Untold Story of Calculus. So how it has arrived. So he has gone through a lot of things. So it's a very painful process, but it's also a rewarding process if you can really go it. Because the popular accounts is a Western account of what the Latinized account of. So it's not it has some untold stories which are there, which you need to mine or discover for yourself, which will come by and by. But first, this acknowledgement should be there, which is not in present times also there. So, for example, there are different schools of this Khairabadi logic. How logic the various schools of logic developed. Logic did not end in 13th century. Various schools of logic, sub-branches of logic developed in 17th century. For example, this Khairabadi school of logic. So you should know these texts. So that's it. How much original sources are available? That's what I'm saying now. It might be available in a lot of ancient libraries like Khuda Bakhsh library. Maybe in Hyderabad there are maybe a lot of books in Iran, Persian Iran, in Egypt maybe there, or maybe in Kashmir also there may be a lot of older people had maybe there some families, they might have some books, libraries of these. For example, what I am trying to say is that you cannot understand Ibn Sina if you don't understand what I should Futuhatul Makkah, but this Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi somehow just, so it was theology, physics, philosophy, everything was united. It's not that you have to be loggerhead at one place. So you have to see what you are. If you are interested in contribution of physics, you have to see also. So it's not, the book may not be about physics, entirely about physics. It's a modern day thing, the classification of science, for example. So you have to see what is physics in philosophy, logic. So you have to dissect it in a particular, so then see it. And you, any question, more question? And you should also be aware of the underlying cultural connotations of a particular civilization. So for them, what is fundamental reality? For example, even if you read Feynman's, if you are a student, there are a lot of physics students in there. So if you see Feynman's third volume, the last sentence of that third volume is that, so we have finally reached, he talks of this last sentence, we have finally reached a stage where we can fundamentally beautifully control nature. So Feynman is the epitome of 20th century physics. So if he says that thing, so it speaks of how fundamentally they view science, civilization also. But the take of Muslim scientists and philosophers, they don't view nature fundamentally that way. So the conclusions also may be there, how technology, how they see technology or applications of science. Science as a philosophy, science as a scientific materialism. So these epistemes have different conclusions also. Muslim civilization in terms of mathematics and physics. Okay. So if somebody has more questions, I need to ask. So should I stop? What about the main reasons for decline or retarding of growth of Muslim civilization? So it's a very complex question. What it may be. So there may be there may be, there are theological reasons also. There are underlying reasons of that what we construct as science fundamentally. For example, Muslim, our understanding of for example, at common Muslim consciousness is at loggerheads when we talk of science and philosophy. So we talk only of this worldly thing. So science, the endeavor of science and philosophy, if you take it as a part of materialistic endeavor, so you begin and end with this thing, that this is, you start with world and you end with this world. So it somehow maybe connotes, somehow people feel that it is at loggerheads with the idea of akhira. So this world is continuation, the akhira is continuation of this world. So so the balance, a lot of people, the interpretations, what I am saying, the theological interpretations are not able to maintain that balance, that the hereafter is the continuation of this world also. So your understanding of your improvements in world, your understanding of world is, it will help in the larger understanding of creator. There are a lot of Quranic verses, not to emphasize that, but there might be another maybe colonial reasons also from last 200-300 years, maybe in Muslim civilization, they might have been at loggerheads. There may be some at deeper level. So there's also something, I'll not say science and technology also, for example. So maybe it's also a problem of resources, how you fight as resources, as nations. So it's also a problem of technology. It's also problem of political imperialism. So it's also a problem of lethargy also. So it's also problem of, for example, why, for example, nowadays people talk coronavirus, people talk of the drug is going to be developed in, for example, in China or in Cambridge or in US or in, but why not in Muslim countries, Turkey or in Pakistan or some Muslim country? So why we are not in that race, Muslims? They might be, we are consumers, but these questions are, they are relevant questions, they should be asked in terms of survival also. So it's not that something is inherently wrong in Islam or teachings that you are lagging in science. Maybe there are different interpretations, what I was saying. There may be imperial reasons. There may be some nations or some people, they go ahead and some people lag. So there are, that is the point, that's the endeavor, so which we are trying to do in this lecture. So how to address this question, that's it. And in the idea of, for example, I would rather the idea of patent, maybe a lot of things, maybe it's no modern day idea, maybe doing things for the sake of doing things, so act of doing. So the idea of patent, it's also militates really the idea of maybe innovation or creation. In when you talk of care, the idea of care, maybe there are, but the thing is there is, can be episteme, which also appreciates this, or we should have an endeavor in science and technology. Hmm. And maybe you need to have a lot of readings also. Maybe there are books like Guns, Germs, and Steel. There is a book called Lost Enlightenment. There is a book, this Silk Road. There are many books. You should, this Yuval Hariri. Maybe the techno evolution of 21st century man. So so you have to see these, dissect what you think of the world and what the world thinks about you. So it's a two-way dialogue. So you should be aware of that dialogue also. So if there are not enough questions, I'll stop.